Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back again to the Lonely Leaving Cert Student channel. And today we're going to be looking at Lucina Shynning in Silence of the Night by Eileen Quilinain. This is part of my Eileen Quilinain series, which is part of the English course on the Irish Leaving Certificate. This is actually, to give you some context, you might want to, if you want to know more about Eileen Quilinain, you might want to watch my Eileen Quilinain background video. It's a relatively short video. It's only around 10 minutes. And it explains a lot about her background and her nationalistic and Ireland-loving background. So, as you might have guessed if you watched the last video, I'm not a great Eileen Quilinain fan. If anything, she's one of my least favorite poets I've actually studied on the course. But this poem, the first three poems we're going to do are possibly the ones I like the most out of her course, or should I say, hate the least. This first one, Lucina Shynning in the Silence of the Night. I'm going to read it for you now. Lucina Shynning in the Silence of the Night by Eileen Quilinain. Moon shining in silence of the night, the heaven being all full of stars, I was reading my book in a ruin by a sour candle, without roast meat or music, strong drink or a shield from the air, blowing in the crazed window, and I felt moonlight on my head, clear after 3 days' rain. I washed in cold water, it was oranged, channeled down bogs dipped between cresses. The bats flew through my room where I slept safely. Sheep stared at me when I awoke. Behind me the waves of darkness lay, the plague of mice, plague of beetles crawling out of the spines of books, plague shadowing pale faces with clay, the disease of the moon gone astray. In the desert I relaxed and amazed, as the mosaic beasts on the chapel floor, when Cromwell had departed, and they saw the sky growing through the hole in the roof. Sheepdogs embraced me, the grasshopper returned with lark and bee. I looked down between the hedges of high thorn, and saw the hare, absorbed, sitting still, in the middle of the track. I heard again the chirp of the stream running. So, I'm going to put the text of this poem down in the description so that you guys can look at it more. If my reading wasn't clear enough for you, you can read it there. In my Quilinain video, I said that I didn't really like the title. It does allude to the opening line of a William Dunbar poem, The Birth of the Antichrist, which was written in the 16th century. Which is, as you can guess, but the birth of the Antichrist. The poem, well, basically, I'm going to be reading what my book says about it. My poetry book says about this poem, and then I'll be giving my own opinion on it, which in this case is not going to be that much because I think this is just fine. But anyway, First, guidelines. This poem is in Quilinain's first collection, Acts and Monuments, which was published in 1972. She was 26 when she wrote it, and her father was very ill in a hospital, and things were kind of getting on top of her. Her cousin had a cottage in the hills, and Quilinain would visit it on her own to escape from, her life and everything, and she went there to calm down and to relax and to try and come to terms with what she was experiencing, and she happened to be reading William Dunbar's poetry at the same time. The poem is a dramatic monologue of a woman re-emerging after a trauma. Quilinain notes that her female characters are often isolated and in motion, doing something that theoretically might be considered dangerous. They are not passive, and they often act on their own, moving beyond stereotypes. The speaker in this poem is a female, alone, with her own response to what fortune throws at her. This poem can be read in many ways. It could be a response to where Quilinain was at the time of writing. It may be read as a reflection on the restorative power of nature or the resilience of women in the face of adversity. Or it could be read as one woman's re-emergence into a post-Cromwellian Ireland. It is set up to each reader to decide which interpretation makes most sense. Now I'm going to go through what the book says, stanza by stanza. In stanza 1, this poem is set in a ruin. Quilinain went there for 3 days when her father was very ill. When she arrived, there were holes in the roof and there was no supplies. There was a candle and not much else. However, it was there that she began to come to terms with her personal situation. May also have reminded her of what post-Cromwellian Ireland may have been like. In 1649, Cromwell invaded Ireland in response to the Irish Confederate Wars. Cromwell's forces, known as the New Model Army, defeated the Confederate and Royalist coalition and occupied the country. Cromwell was excessively cruel, and the impact of the war was indisputably severe. Known among the Irish as the Antichrist, actually, he butchered countless Irish men, women, and children. If you guys want me to make a full video on Cromwell's invasion of Ireland, the Irish Confederate Wars, or the English Civil War, please leave it in the description. I love history, and I would love to make more historical videos other than just what's on the history course. There is a stillness and tranquility about the figure in this poem. She is sitting under the silent moonlit sky, peacefully reading by the candlelight. She doesn't actually have roast meat or strong drink, but her head is clear after a 3-day deluge of rain. The 3 days' rain may actually represent Cromwell spreading his wave of darkness and destruction as he crosses the country, razing the land and crushing the spirit of the Irish. I disagree with this, personally. I think that's a little bit stretching to compare. I think the closest you get to Cromwell is him being mentioned, and also the fact that the title is a reference to the poem The Birth of the Antichrist. I don't think the deluge of rain is in reference to Cromwell. It might be like her deluge of emotion at her father's illness, but I don't think it's actually about Cromwell's, invasion. Anyway, I'm supposed to be saying this after I read out what's in the book. Stanza 2, a wash in cold water in line 8 seems to have had a cleansing and redemptive effect on the poet as she wakes up and encounters nature anew with the bats and the sheep. Stanza 3, she remains still and leaves the darkness of the deluge behind her. Quote, behind me the waves of darkness lay, line 12. She rejects the temptation to challenge and delve into whatever has happened before. She does not journey, but finds herself in a pure space, at one with nature. She has woken up. In this stillness she relaxes and bathes in moonlit channels. The listing of the plagues in the 3rd stanza of mice, beetles, and faces reminds us of the plagues of Egypt. She states that these are behind her. The diseases of the moon gone astray, in line 16, could be a reference to the loss of control she may have felt at the foot of her father's illness. In the 4th stanza, we see the poet identifying with the mosaic beasts on the chapel floor that outlasted the warrior. Their chapel may have been destroyed, but they have survived. Like the poet in the ruin, to see the sky growing through the hole in the roof, this is a sight they never would have seen if the chapel had remained intact. Perhaps the still and unwavering power of nature is something that the poet may have been blind to before her awakening. In the 5th stanza, it describes the kind of kinship that the poem shares with the animals and the sheepdogs that embraces her and the wildlife. The hare shares her stillness. Both are absorbed till their trance is broken by the first sound of the poem, the chirp of the stream running, etc., etc. In this poem, the poet seems to gain entry into a world that she might have missed. She is surrounded by animal life and the open sky and becomes an extension of animate and inanimate nature. The poem has a peaceful, serene, and otherworldly tone, this in contrast to its themes of survival, resilience, nature, stillness, and war. The language used is concrete, yet strange images are created. The imagery is vivid and dark, but ultimately hopeful. It makes use of various symbols, including water, the night sky, the hare, and the books. That was what my poetry book said about it, and if you can use any of that in your essays and combine it with some of the other things I said in my normal Quilinain video. Now I'm going to talk about what I think of this poem. I think it is a decent poem. I don't actually have any major problems with it like I have with some of her other poems, and I think it's just a very nice nature poem about someone trying to reconnect with nature, and the whole, when Cromwell departed, they saw the sky growing through the hole in the roof, kind of means, I take that as Cromwell came, he destroyed this chapel because it was a Catholic chapel, I'm assuming. Cromwell was a Puritan, he hated Catholics, he hated most Protestants too, and he obviously would have destroyed this chapel and probably killed the monks or nuns or priests that were tending to it. And he destroyed it but gave it back to nature, kind of combining that by he inadvertently gave it back to this pagan idea of nature. And I think I do like that bit. I do like that kind of, once Cromwell left, the sky grew through the hole in the roof. I like that image a lot. It's one of my favorite Quilinain poems. Like I said, one of my 3 favorites. And I relatively agree with a lot of what the book says, except for that thing about the deluge being Cromwell. I'd very much disagree with that. Yeah, I think that's the end of this episode. If you want to see more, please click on more videos. Remember to like and like if you liked, dislike if you disliked, subscribe if you want to see more. Oh, I'm supposed to end these things with a question, so I'm going to take one question from the book and one of my own personal questions. In your opinion, why did Quilinain choose this particular title, Lucina Shynning in Silence of the Night? And I think, how would you describe the speaker in this poem? Is she confused? Is she afraid? Is she deeply sad? Is she lonely? Is it about that kind of feminist idea? Up to you. And my question for you guys is, would you like to see more historical videos based on the kind of Irish history that have been just touched on in this, like the Oliver Cromwell stuff? Because I do want to talk about that more and more, because I do love watching history YouTubers myself. So yeah, comment if you'd like to see more of that. And good luck in all of your exams.